Well, good evening and welcome to Christmas Eve at Creative Life. Merry Christmas to everybody, those of you in the room, those of you who are watching. And I just want to set up a little what we're going to do tonight, then have an opening, and we'll get on with the program. A few years ago, we started having 4 speakers on Christmas Eve. We toyed with different things over the years. I gave long talks, I gave shorter talks, we had readers, we had all sorts of stuff. But now we have 4, 3 ministers and an almost minister who are going to speak. And so every year they give me the honor of coming up with 4 things to talk about, a set of 4 things, if you will. Last year we cheated a little bit. We had 5. We used the 5 senses, but we combined taste and smell because they kind of are the same. So anyway, and what they don't know yet is that next year we're going to do 4 classes of subatomic particles. And
I'll take quark.
you got quark. I'm taking muon just because it sounds fun, doesn't it? But tonight we've got the 4 directions, the 4 cardinal points of the compass. And why? Well, you'll hear. You just have to listen, and you'll hear. At some point in the program toward the end, we will pass the ubiquitous collection basket, it being Christmas Eve, and it's how we sustain this place. And then at the end, you've got a candle, everybody, I'm sure, and you'll come up and light your candle off of the appropriately labeled candles here, representing aspects or attributes of spirit that you want to more greatly incorporate into your life in the coming year, okay? So I'm very grateful to all of our musicians who've been working very hard to make this happen. Folks like Mark who've been helping around the edges with the prep, and my wife Jay and setting up for things. And Denise Slate, who is in the room tonight, who put up the tree and decorated the place. Would you give her a hand, please? Thank you so much. And I'm sure Dennis had something to do with it too. So let's take a moment now and just relax and turn within. And I know it's the middle of the busiest time of, well, probably the busiest time of the year for you, or close to it. Some of you traveled great distances to get here. Others of you are hosting people in your home. There have been gifts to buy and wrap and deliver. There have been lights to hang and decorations, and always food, lots and lots of food. But right now you're exactly where you need to be, and everything has been handled. So we breathe together as one. We relax into this sweet evening, aware as we do so that billions of humans across this world are turning their attention to the God of their understanding as well. Because for Christian and non-Christian alike, this is a time where the angels touch the earth. We feel it. It's a time of goodwill toward one another. We release our attachment to agendas, to competition, to ambition, and we turn our gaze toward the starry heavens, which represent the source of our being here on this planet. So for this sweet time together, for all the entertainment that is going to come from it, for all of the centering and balance and grounding, and yes, even healing that's occurring in and through each one of us tonight, I am so deeply grateful. Thank you, infinite presence of life, Mother, Father, God, that this is so, and so it is.
Merry Christmas, CLC.
Merry Christmas.
I believe everyone knows me, but I am Dainill, the soon-to-be minister of the bunch. And tonight I speak for the West. The West where the sun sets, turning day into night. And as day turns into night, we tend to look within our shadow self, our subconscious, if you will. That small, still place where we know, we should know, we do know. Sometimes we need to remember that we are whole, healthy, perfect, exactly who and how we are. That idea of perfection kind of resonated with me today. I had a very, very busy day. Worked all day, had family, food here, and I knew it was going to be a busy day. So I planned it. I planned it accordingly, knowing it was going to be a busy day. And what happened? The universe laughed at me. That's what happened. But in everything going kind of caca on me today, I found myself just before I came here in the kitchen with my 3 boys who were helping me to fix the holiday gumbo, knowing that I had to come here and get ready. And it is a moment that I didn't plan for. It was a moment that will forever live in my heart. It is that moment that was whole, healthy, and perfect, exactly the way it is, exactly what it was, and exactly what it will forever be for each and every one of us, for me and for them. We all have those moments. And if you think back to your childhood, if you look back to before the first time some kid in your class talked about you or rolled their eyes at you, before the first time that you got in trouble and you knew it was your fault, you knew you were wrong, before the first time that you questioned if you were good enough, if you were right enough, if you were really perfect. If you think back, there was a time that it wasn't even a question. It just was. Because you just were. Here, just doing. You know, as I was in the kitchen cooking, my dogs were sitting on their beds, like right across the room. And they were looking at me, of course, waiting for me to drop something or whatever. But I'm frantically running around the kitchen, sweating and everything. And they're just laying there relaxing, living their best life, you know? And it's like, in that moment, I just thought, like, how nice for them. Wouldn't it be great to be just someone's loving pet, where all you have to do is just be? Just be, and they just love on you and feed you and come and scratch behind your ear and rub on you, and that's your life. Like, how great is that, you know? But we all had that at one point. You may not necessarily remember all of it, but you have glimpses. You have little inklings of those moments when you were everything everybody wanted. They looked for you. Those are the moments that we need to hold on to for ourselves. We need to look for us in each and every moment. Perfect does not necessarily mean that we get it right all the time. It doesn't mean that everything we plan goes exactly how we want. What perfect means is that you, the real, authentic, fully you version of you, is present in the moment. Not putting on airs for someone, not living up to other people's expectations, but being fully and completely who you are and how you are. That's the perfection that we find in looking back, in looking forward, and in being in the here and now. So I hope in this Christmas spirit, holiday spirit, whether you celebrate Christmas or not, you look back, you look in, and you remember that you are whole, healthy, and perfect, exactly how you are, with all the ailments, with all the issues, with all the challenges that you have in this life. You are still exactly who and how you are. You are the perfect representation of the divine. You are wanted. You are needed. Your connection is vital to all the rest of us. Because you being fully who you are gives each and every one of us permission to be who we are too. I hope each and every one of you have a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. I love you all.
Nope. Looks like I'm going to need the glasses. I speak for the North. I almost titled this Penguins, Polar Bears, and Santa's Workshop. But I'm not going to talk about penguins, polar bears, or Santa's Workshop. The North is associated with the earth. But the earth under a blanket of snow. Winter. It's a time of cleansing. It's a time of trials. It's a time of wisdom, a time of storytelling, and a time of the elders, such as Santa and the crone. My word is wonder. And I want to start with a story about wonder. It's a real short one. I went to high school in a little bitty town in the middle of Georgia. We don't often see snow there. Probably about as often as we see snow here, right? One year, I believe it was my senior year, but I'm not going to swear to that. It snowed while we were in school. There was a young lady who had moved up that year from South Georgia. She'd never seen snow before. The teachers let us out to play in the snowflakes. I still remember the wonder on her face at seeing the snow. That is what this time can be. In the hustle of modern life, we don't take the time. One of the things that we do, the animals do in the winter, because they are far more wise than we are, is they hibernate. We don't do that. We don't take the time to rest. We don't take the time to lie fallow. It's an old plowing term. This is also a time to plan. Yule, which we just had, is a time of rest, reflection, introspection, and planning for the new year. It's also a time to party with your community, with all of the things that won't last through the winter. It's also a time that we can give gifts to each other. It was a time when we could give gifts to help somebody else who might not make it through the winter, but also to accept gifts from each other. Now, I did mention Santa Claus. It's the North, right? Santa Claus in the North. You ever looked into the lineage of Santa Claus? Man, I spent 2 days on the internet. I got 4 pages of notes. Fortunately, I did not bring those. Otherwise, we'd be here all night. I'm just going to give you a couple of highlights. One, there is a St. Nicholas. He was a 4th century bishop in the area of Turkey. And he did a whole lot of things, including, my favorite story, was there was this poor man who had 3 daughters. He didn't have enough money for dowries, so he was planning to sell them into slavery. St. Nicholas heard about this, so he drove by one night, or I don't assume he drove by, rode by one night and chucked a bag of gold down the chimney, and it landed in the stocking that was hanging by the fire. So she got married. So he did it again. And he did it a 3rd time. But the 3rd time he got caught by the father. And the father was so grateful. And St. Nicholas, of course, said, please don't tell anybody. Obviously, he did. Now, if you're a fan of Expedition Unknown, Josh Gates did do a thing on St. Nick, and there is a bone from that 4th century saint in, I think, Minneapolis. Most of him is in Italy. Some of him is still in Turkey. Yeah. But I just thought it was funny, right? Okay. There's also the Dutch Santa Claus. There's also Father Christmas. Now, Father Christmas was not Santa Claus. Father Christmas was a jolly feasting spirit for the adults. And then I learned a new one called Christkind, which was translated into Kris Kringle, meaning the Christ child. Christkind was an angel-like figure who often accompanied St. Nicholas on his holiday missions. That was a new one on me. There's another one, and there's no way I'm going to pronounce this one right. Jolteman was thought to deliver gifts in a sleigh drawn by goats. That's from Scandinavia. Huh? Oh, hey, I haven't gotten to Odin yet. Hang on. Or did I skip him? You know what? I skipped him. Odin. Okay, so Odin was Odin rode an 8-legged horse, right? Which may be where we got the 8 reindeer. But Thor was the one who was in the chariot drawn by the goats. And if you haven't looked it up, and I forget what city it's in, they build this ginormous straw goat, and then the public tries to set it on fire. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they don't. So in French, there is Père Noël, and there was a female, La Befana, from Italy. And by the way, she rode a broomstick. But she would come down your chimney, sweep your house, and leave gifts for the girls and boys who had done their chores. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, I want to remind you, one of the things about Santa is, whether you were good or bad, you still got a gift. Now, if you were good, you got something sweet to eat, or you got a toy. And if you were on the naughty list, you still got twigs or coal. You still got the means to heat your home and cook your food. Nobody is left out. And I'm just going to remind you, Santa ran with a rough crowd. We're not going to talk about Grilla, the Winter Witch. We're not going to talk about Krampus, who would beat naughty children. And there's a whole other list of them. But Santa brings out the kid in all of us. I don't know about you, but I get excited every time I see Santa. I went to the Christmas concert down at Unity. And they had a Santa. And you better believe I went and had my picture taken with that Santa. Wonder. That is the magic of the Christmas season. To remind us of when we were kids, the magic. There are 2 quotes from the Bible. Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. That's Matthew 18:3. Mark 10:15. Truly I tell you, anyone who does not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter into it. This is the season when we can pull ourselves back into that magic of childhood. Back to that perfect time that Dainill referenced. Now, when they told me that we were going to wear blue, I kind of went, oh, good. I was planning to wear this anyway. Because it reminds me of the Aurora Borealis, which is also in the north, right? Have you ever looked at the stories of the Aurora Borealis? Don't go down that rabbit hole. Because most of them are kind of scary. If you go outside and you whistle, the Aurora Borealis is going to come and snatch you up. Doesn't tell you where it's going to take you. But there are a few stories about the Aurora Borealis that are the magic of the season. The Algonquin people believe that their cultural hero, Nanabozho, relocated to the far north after he finished creating the earth. He lit large fires, which reflected back to his people in the form of the northern lights. This let them know he was thinking about them, even from far away. The Finnish word for the northern lights translates as foxfires. The fire fox is a mythical and elusive creature of the north, coveted by hunters. As it runs along the fells, the fox's flaming tail whips crystals of snow into the sky, and the fur scratches the trees, setting the skies on fire. There is a small element of truth in this explanation, as fur can be charged with static electricity. If anybody's heard me pop the microphones, we all know that this is true, right? Producing sparks. The indigenous Canadians have similar ideas about the fur of their reindeer. I'm not wearing reindeer antlers for nothing. There's also another word in Finnish, ripo, which means spell. Thus, the auroras are spell fires caused by the forces of darkness and light waging war in the sky. There are a couple more, and this one I'm just telling you because it's really, really funny. When they witnessed the lights, many Inuit, the Arctic's indigenous people, believed that they were the spirits of the dead playing a game with a walrus skull as the ball. There's one particular island called Nunavak in the Bering Sea, which flipped this story on the head, believing that it was walrus spirits playing with a human skull. Mm-hmm. Yep. I know, right? Most of the stories about the Aurora Borealis are that they are the spirits of the dead dancing. So, in the wonder of the season, And I know that we are too far south to see the aurora borealis. But in the wonder of the season, let's imagine all of the people who have gone before us dancing in the skies. I invite you into the wonder of Santa Claus and all of the lineage that came before him, including that rougher crowd that he ran with. May this season bring you wonder, and may it bring you rest. I speak for the North.
Is that Santa?
Probably not. It's a good job I'm used to taking instructions from women, because I'm a Brit and we're very polite, you know. Not quite as polite as the Canadians, but we're polite. So I'm waiting for Brian to finish doing whatever he was doing over there, and then some people on the front row who are female, who I will not mention their names, but they've already spoken, were telling me to get up here. So just do it, you know. Yeah, just get up there. It's against my nature, you know. You got to realize that. Listen, I get enough instruction from another female who tells me before I come up here, "You have an accent, David. Speak clearly." Plus, on top of that, she said, there are some people here whose first language is not English. You got to make sure you speak really clearly. Well, I'm trying to do that. My notes, by the way, are on my Pixel, which is at home. But it really doesn't matter. When you were talking about Georgia there, well, I say, it brought back as a kid. You know, as a kid, when I was 6, 7 years old, I was an altar boy. Who knows what an altar boy is?
I know what it is.
Yeah, well, they're altar people now, I guess, you know, because they have altar girls as well. So we had to go to midnight mass. Now, you can imagine a 6-year-old kid has got to go to midnight mass. We've been up all day, right? And they row us all up at the front so everybody can see us. And then our job, the church I went to was called St. Anne's, and it had a huge altar, so big that you could walk around the back. It had steps coming up, and you could actually put stuff on top of the altar there. But our job was actually to get this really long pole with a taper on the end and light 6 large candles. Right? You remember this kind of thing, Dainill? Yeah, oh, way bigger than me. I mean, the candles are bigger than I was, you know. So this one day, you know, I had got my taper, and then there's all this scuffling you could hear. I mean, the whole congregation, it's like hundreds of people in the congregation, and they can hear the scuffling. So I go around the back of the altar to look. 2 of my colleagues are having a fight over who's going to have this taper. Thinking nobody can hear them, but they could. Anyway, I speak for the East. And I've got to tell you, it's really odd, because I've always had a really big problem with things like Western Hemisphere. Look, we live on a planet that revolves around its north and south axis, correct? There is no Western Hemisphere. There isn't. It's a figment of our imagination. And so then I started, like Lisa, I did some research on East. And I found out how we, people in Europe, started using the term East. It was actually the Greeks. The Greeks decided that Persia and beyond was East. So if you were east of the Dainill, you know, or Hellespont it was called in those days, you lived in the East. And then I started thinking, well, what to me is really significant about the East? And that's one obvious thing is my talk is awakening. And every day, the earth awakens to new life, right? The sun comes up. And lots of cultures around the world actually orient their buildings towards the east. And by the way, orient is another word. Orient actually comes from the Romans. And east actually is Proto-Indo-European, which actually means dawn or shine. and Orient means rising. So I'm doing my research, and then I'm thinking, well, there's definitely wonder in the rising sun. And if you think about Christmas, well, the rising sun to most Christians is Jesus, right? You know, who by Jesse's term has said before was, you know, one of if not the most important people who's been on this planet. But then I started thinking about other religions, because, you know, I teach world religions. And I was thinking about the ancient Egyptians. And although they had a pantheon of gods, one of their main gods, if not the main god, was Ra, the sun god. Or sometimes he got different names, like Akhenaten, you know, named him the Aton, and that was when he was monotheistic. But the thing about Ra is that every day he went through the whole cycle of life. He rose as a newborn in the morning, he arched across the sky, and by evening he became an old man. And then at night he actually descended into the underworld, from which he had to actually fight the serpent of the underworld, but he was supported by a whole raft of gods and goddesses, so that he would actually come through. So when he arose the next morning, there was great wonder. Because, why? Because there was new life again. But then I started to think, we tend to look at the light side of life, but we often, as Dainill mentioned, you know, with introspection there, we sometimes forget to look at the dark side. And then I remembered a book I'd read, which was by Debbie Ford. You probably know the book I'm going to quote, right? The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, right? And then I was thinking, well, where did that come from? Well, as far as I know, she actually got it from Carl Jung, and Jesse will correct me if I'm wrong. I think she got it from Carl Jung's work on shadow. And I thought, well, for a Christmas Eve talk, it's good to remind ourselves that our shadow side isn't something that we should forget. It isn't something that we hide. It's something that we acknowledge is there. And we're not always chasers of light. In the spiritual realm, we acknowledge the side of us that most people don't like to acknowledge. And our job is to reconcile that side of ourselves with the rest. So that was the main place I was going with this talk. Because I often find there's traits in me that I don't like, and then I find out there's traits in everybody that they don't like, right? We've all got traits that we don't like, but they're not necessarily evil. They're just traits that don't fit in with society half the time, you know? So my message to you tonight is, you know, to embrace the side of you which normally you would hide in the darkness, and start to bring it into the light and start to integrate it. And how do we do that? We do that by doing our spiritual work. So when every day we do our spiritual work, we pray, we meditate, and we bring these things back into light. So my message to you is, don't be afraid of the dark side of yourself. It's a part of human life. And it's a part that we need to bring back into the light so we can integrate ourselves as a whole. And that, my friends, is my message for you for tonight.
I used to be able to lick my fingers and pinch a candle off. Then I lost my nerve. You know, I probably could still do it, but you lose your nerve. Well, we come to giving time. Which will give me a moment to review what I want to tell you. And your support throughout the year has been so meaningful to us. It allows us to have this wonderful property, this beautiful place to meet and to serve and to teach this amazing teaching. So the ushers will come forward and pass amongst us, and we're very grateful for your year-end gifts. Thank you. Let's say together now, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all the good I am and have, all the good I give and receive. I am prosperous now, and so it is. Yeah. Don't need a drum. Just, yeah. You never play another person's drums. First rule of music, am I right? Yep. You bring your own snare and your own cymbals if they allow you that much. So. I love all our wonderful musicians tonight, and I have to tell you that these two have been the core of our Christmas Eve music for over 30 years now. Peter Trout, Jeffrey Oshman. Thank you, gentlemen. Something like that. Awesome. It's a long time. All right. Well, we have about 45 minutes left, so. I think I'm up next, aren't I?
You're up next.
Yeah, okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jesse.
We rehearsed everything but my part. See, that's the issue, right? Something like that. Well, I speak for the South. And let me just get this part out of the way first of all. We are in the southern United States. Those of you who are watching online, you may be browsing across various Christmas Eve services and you happened on us and you thought, I like these people. Where are they? Well, if you've been paying attention, you heard a mention of Christmas gumbo. That right there will tell you. They probably aren't doing that in Finland tonight. So we are on the Texas Gulf Coast. But I speak for the South, which is an unusual place to wind up. It tells us where we've come from. It tells us where we're going. We set the 4 directions, and I put them out there to the group, these other 3 speakers, and I said, so who wants what? And they quickly snatched them up, and I was left with South. Then they said, we want you to speak last. Okay, well then you had to do it clockwise, right? And so that put Dainill in the leadoff spot at west. So we went west, north, east, south. Now, the 4 cardinal directions, as you've heard alluded to by most, if not all, of the speakers, also line up with the principal times of day. Because the sun rises in the east, right? Actually, it's the northeast, southeast, depending on what time of year it is, but it's more or less in the east. And it sets in the west, and meanwhile it passes through the meridian, and you have dawn and dusk. And in the way of the world's thinking, everything starts at dawn, and it cycles through that way. You wake up in the morning, ready for business, ready for action, ready for the important stuff. And as the day wears on and turns to night, well, it's a time of rest and refuge and not a lot of accomplishment. Now, of course, we've adjusted this as we've gone through the years with the invention of electric light and so on, where you can work at any hour and so on. But the There's something in the collective psyche of humankind which tells you, and if you've ever done shift work, like graveyard shift and stuff, you know this. It tells you that to be a really productive person, you need to get busy in the morning. If you go to work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, no matter how hard you work, you put in an 8-hour shift, there's still some part of you that feels kind of like a slacker when everybody else is up and at 'em at first thing, milking the cows and so on. When I came into religious science, and I started to hear how thoughts are things, and I started to learn about the creative process, how my thoughts convert themselves into form. My consciousness manifests my experience. I had a preconceived idea of how that worked that I discovered was inaccurate. In fact, I discovered that it was exactly the reverse of how things really work. We start at dusk. I'm ending us tonight at noon. I'm the midday guy, when the sun in the south at meridian height is the beauty and glory of the day. But it's at the dusk of our experience that we go into the great subconscious, from which emanates all our good. And you have heard the other speakers allude to this. Now, when the Hebrews were waiting for a Messiah, the arrival of whom is what we're doing here tonight, the conclusion of that story to a great many people, when they were awaiting a Messiah, they were expecting a personality. They were all in the sunlit side of things. He's going to come in here and he's going to kick the Romans out. And he's going to prove us right. And he's going to be a God, King eternal, and he's going to fix everything. We always think this about personalities. If you swap one personality out for the other, everything will be fine. What they hadn't anticipated was that they were really waiting for a principle, not a personality. And that the principle was already on hand. The principle was already within them. The principle of loving one another as he had loved them, as through his great personality connected to the principle of reality, Jesus the Christ had loved them, had loved his students, and had loved the population at large. When a personality connects with a principle, you have change, you have growth, you have positive momentum forward. When a personality is unconnected from principle, you just have ego. You just have somebody, what is it, they talk about vain repetitions. You just have vain repetitions and a lot of noise. Not sound, not music, just noise. But when you have a personality connected to a principle, you have somebody who looks within and reflects. He looked within himself. He looked within the great subconscious mind. He looked within his feeling nature. This is what Jesus did. That's where he found, love one another as I have loved you. That's called reciprocity. That's the reciprocal principle of love. That if you love, you will be loved. Emerson said this. He said, to have a friend, you know what you do to have a friend? You know how many strategies people launch to have friends? Emerson put it so simply. He said, to have a friend, be a friend. You start out by being a friend. We say to ourselves, well, I can't be a friend till I have some friends. Otherwise I'll just make a fool of myself standing here being all friendly and stuff if I don't have other people around. She says, no, that's not how the creative principle works. How the creative principle works is you start where you wish to end up. So when we're ending up in the south or midday, that's the place of manifestation, but the engines of manifestation have all occurred before then. See, you and I fall into the habit of looking at the world from a worldly standpoint, just like we look at the fact that we live on a round planet that, as you heard earlier, orbits the sun. This was news to me, but we do. But because we're on this planet, that's our vantage point. We speak in shorthand. They'll say, well, tomorrow morning the sun's going to rise. Now, I know that isn't really what happens, but it's a whole lot faster than saying what really does, right? Tomorrow morning the zenith and the ecliptic and all this. No, it's the sun's going to rise and go through 12 hours or so, the sun's going to set, So we get into the habit of looking at things from a worldly standpoint, failing to take into account the great truth, the scary truth, the literally biblically awful truth, that we're not from here. We didn't originate here. Yes, the earth is our home and biologically gave us roots to grow from, but the soul that incarnated here in the forms that we wear, it's timeless and infinite. It's not bound to any planet, not just a different world someplace, but all worlds at once. So what we're called to do at times like this is try to recapture the senses you heard in all of these talks, recapture the sense of the shadow aspect of the self, the feeling nature that sometimes we flee from. We want to turn toward that, not run away from it. We want to find the childlike self in us that is not jaded, as Ernest Holmes says, is not sore at everybody and mad at everything, right? Because sometimes we get that way. Have you had it up to here with Christmas yet? I ask that pretty much every year. Boy, I'll be glad when this is over and life can get back. Yeah, come on. Some part of you's looked forward to this all year. Some part of you has. Let that part be honored. Let that part be redeemed, brought back. So the creative process actually works. Starts at dusk, works all night long. In the dark, in the invisible realm, in the place of consciousness. At dawn, it bursts forth in a sidebar to the story. It bursts out of the tomb. And in the light of day, in the noonday sun, where I grant you only mad dogs and Englishmen typically are found, still in, with a nod to someone in the room, in the noonday sun stands the shining manifestation of the thing that you most hope for, the life that you wish to create. And it's only there because of all the other work that was done. So as we go away from here tonight to our homes and with our families and enjoy the Christmas and so on, I ask you to remember that you are in the midst of your own creative genius. You're bringing something forward in consciousness that you've never known before, yet at the same time is dimly familiar. You're manifesting a reality that you came to this earth specifically to engineer. You came here for a purpose. It's a complicated thing, highly nuanced, and involves a lot of other godlings, many of whom, as Lisa pointed out on our Facebook page the other day, you've not met yet. And you have no idea what role they're going to play in your life, but they are. So and I was looking on my phone I thought everybody else is citing their Bible passages, and I didn't cite mine. So thanks to the miracle of modern technology and an available Wi-Fi, Romans 12:2, be not conformed to the things of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Be not conformed to the things of this world. Conformity to this world is to look at the creative process in such a way as to think that it's a mortal thing, that it's a temporal thing, that it's a spatial thing. To be transformed by the renewing of your mind is to realize that it's an infinite thing, an eternal thing, an everlasting thing, just as you are, just as your life is, just as truth is, just as your destiny is. So I thank you very much for coming tonight.
All right, normally I would do a benediction, but I ask permission to do something a little bit different. You may have heard this story before, but listen closely because the words are different. 'Twas the night before Yule, and all through the glen not a creature was stirring, not a fox, not a hen. A mantle of snow shone brightly that night as it lay on the ground, reflecting moonlight. The fairies were all nestled snug in their trees, unmindful of flurries and a chilly north breeze. The elves and the gnomes were down in their burrows, sleeping like babes in their soft earthen furrows. When lo, the earth moved with a thunderous quake, causing chairs to fall over and dishes to break. The little folks scrambled to get on their feet, then raced to the river where they usually meet. What happened, they wondered. They questioned, they probed. As they shivered in night clothes, some bare-armed, some robed. What caused the earth to shudder? What caused her to shiver? They all spoke at once as they stood by the river. Then what to their wondering eyes should appear but a shining gold light in the shape of a sphere? It blinked and it twinkled and it winked like an eye. Then it flew straight up and was lost in the sky. Before they could murmur, before they could bustle, there emerged from the crowd with a swish and a rustle a stately old crone with her hand on a cane, resplendent in green with a flowing white mane. As she passed by them, the old crone's perfume, smelling of meadows and flowers abloom, made each of the fay folk think of the spring when the earth wakes from slumber and the birds start to sing. My name is Gaia, the old crone proclaimed, in a voice that at once was both wild and tamed. I've come to remind you, for you seem to forget, that Yule is a time of rebirth, and yet I see no hearth fires, hear no music, no bells. The air isn't filled with rich, fragrant smells of baking and roasting and simmering stews, of cider that's mulled or other hot brews. There aren't any children at play in the snow or houses lit up by candles' glow. Have you forgotten, my children, the fun of celebrating the rebirth of the sun? She looked at the fay folk, her eyes going round, as they shuffled their feet and stared at the ground. Then she smiled, the smile that brings light to the day. Come, my children, she said, let's play. They gathered the mistletoe, gathered the holly, threw off the drab, and drew on the jolly. They lit a big bonfire, and they danced and they sang. They brought out the bells and clapped when they rang. They strung lights on the trees and bows, oh so merry, in colors of cranberry, bayberry, cherry. They built giant snowmen and adorned them with hats, then surrounded them with snowbirds and snowcats and bats. Then just before dawn, at the end of their fest, before they went homeward to seek out their rest, the fay folk they gathered round their favorite oak tree and welcomed the sun neath the tree's finery. They were just reaching home when suddenly it came. The gold light returned like an arrow shot flame. It lit on the treetop where they could see from afar the gold-like sphere turned into a star. The old crone just smiled at the sight. Happy Yuletide, my children, she whispered, and good night. And so it is.